I found a limping girl in the remote mountains. As I was bandaging her wound, a flurry of bullet comments flashed across my vision.
Stop.
This is your fiancé's lifesaver. Help her and your engagement party will be ruined. Still skeptical? Just look at the bangle on her wrist. Instinctively, I tightened the tourniquet in my hand. It was the last night of our project's resource survey, and a landslide had trapped us in a secluded village. My engagement to Julian Sterling was only 2 days away. We came from prominent, long-connected families, childhood sweethearts whose union would deepen our family's cooperation. Julian had always been kind to me, almost to a fault. He had a habit of tracing the bangle on my wrist. No matter how fierce our arguments, a glance at my wrist would calm him, and he would apologize. I had been looking forward to this engagement for months, and the thought of potentially not making it back made my heart race. A sharp gasp drew my attention. Lyra, the young girl we were staying with, had spilled some soup, and her mother, Mrs. Finch, was scolding her loudly. "You clumsy, worthless girl." A few colleagues exchanged glances and sighed. Mrs. Finch was a typical rural matriarch, obsessed with her sons and dismissive of her daughter. She often hinted she wanted us to help her son Jed find work in the city. Jed was a lazy dropout, holed up in a dilapidated internet cafe, playing games all day. But her daughter was different. Thoughtful and capable, she had helped us from the moment we arrived, mending Mr. Thompson's worn trousers and even running errands to buy me feminine hygiene products. Listening to Mrs. Finch's increasingly loud curses, Mr. Thompson finally intervened. "Ma'am, is the soup ready?" "Oh, coming right away," she replied, her tone softening. We had paid generously to stay there, and her attitude shifted once she saw the money. "You worthless girl, hurry up with the bowls," she snapped. Lyra rushed forward but stumbled, and a stack of bowls clattered to the ground. That's when I noticed her limp. Her right foot struggled to support her, scraped and bruised from the fall. Useless. I cut in, grabbing Mrs. Finch's arm and handing her $100 bill. "Accidents happen. Let's just get new bowls." Mrs. Finch snatched the money, forcing a smile. "Young? She's 20. Useless and crippled too." I subtly shifted my own right foot, hidden beneath my clothes. Years ago, an accident had left mine slightly deformed. Seeing her, I felt an unexpected pang of empathy. She looked frail, almost fragile, yet she was already 20. Carefully, I pulled out a tourniquet and antiseptic from my backpack, cleaning the wound. Mrs. Finch muttered on, praising her son and begging us to take him on. "Isn't Van Industries running a community uplift initiative?
Take my son.
Train him well. He'll make something of himself." The initiative was meant for disadvantaged students, not grown freeloaders. If anyone deserved help, it was this girl. She had dropped out after her first year of high school to serve her family, waiting for a marriage that never came because of her limp. I asked gently, "Do you want to continue your studies?" "I can." Suddenly, my vision blurred, and a torrent of warning comments streamed before my eyes. "You can't. Don't be foolish. This is your fiancé's lifesaver. Help her, and your engagement party will be ruined." Still in doubt. "Look at her wrist. An antique carved bangle, just like yours." Instinctively, I tightened the tourniquet in my hand, my gaze flicking to her sleeve. Everyone envied me for having Julian Sterling as my fiancé, devoted, gentle, and endlessly loving. We had grown up side by side, sharing both triumphs and crises. He always kissed my wrist repeatedly. I had joked once, "If you love it so much, you can have this bangle." But he had only smiled and refused, saying he loved me deeply. Until these warning comments appeared, I had never doubted his love. I had only believed he cherished the bangle I wore. "Ms. Van." I snapped back to reality, realizing I had been staring at the young girl's wrist far too long. She smiled shyly and touched her bangle. "This was my grandmother's," she said. It was an antique, flat wooden band, strikingly similar to mine. The only difference was color. Mine a deep brown, hers a soft peach. Somehow, I felt an odd sense of familiarity.
"See? We told you."
"Julian Sterling only treats you well because he thinks you're his lifesaver. Bring this girl back, and if Julian notices her bangle at the engagement, he'll believe you schemed to replace his idealized first love. His revenge will be merciless." The comments outlined the plot of a white moonlight angst novel. If I rescued Lyra from the Finch family, Julian would mistake her for his lost love, call off the wedding, and drag us through endless drama. He would blame me for every obstacle in his pursuit of her, ultimately destroying Van Industries and humiliating my genuine affection. But I was innocent. Julian had never explained why he valued that bangle, nor spoken of his past. He would push me relentlessly until the story turned him into the main villain. Then, 10 years later, a new generation of readers would find the plot absurd, petition to rewrite the story, and I would regain my place as the true protagonist, resetting the events. Pretend you know nothing, leave this village, and cut off the Finch family from outside contact. Julian Sterling will never discover the truth. Before Lyra appeared, Julian was already devoted to the female lead. Men are susceptible to temptation. Prevent risks before they arise. The female lead must not be a bleeding heart. The comments argued incessantly in my head. I finished applying the last bandage and helped Lyra to her feet. You still haven't answered. Do you want to continue your studies? I asked gently. Mrs. Finch hesitated, clearly reluctant. But Mr. Thompson mentioned casually that he knew a relative whose daughter had graduated from a prestigious university and received a bride price of $500,000. Mrs. Finch's face lit up immediately. Can she still study at her age? Lyra's expression grew anxious. Ms. Van, I dropped out 4 years ago. The less-than-fairy-tale truth was that Lyra hadn't been a stellar student either. But I believed that reading more books and seeing more of the world could open doors for anyone. That conviction was why I had insisted on promoting the Community Uplift Initiative alongside the engineering project, because there was someone I once owed, and Lyra reminded me of her. It's almost June. If you haven't decided yet, I invite you to my graduation ceremony, I told her gently. Seeing a university firsthand might help her make a choice. After the plane touched down, I momentarily drifted, lost in thought. Ms. Van. I touched my wrist, reminded that Lyra had arranged for us to exit through separate channels. Julian Sterling was coming to pick me up. Despite the warnings in the bullet comments, after so many years of shared history, I wanted to give him one more chance. Perhaps the bangle was just a catalyst, not the foundation of his affection. Stepping off the plane, Julian stood there, tulips in hand, radiating his usual distinguished aura. He reached forward to take my hand, and then froze, eyes dropping to my bare wrist. Serena, where's your bangle? I feigned annoyance. It got scratched during the survey, so I sent it for repairs. I've worn it for so many years. I hardly notice it's gone. 10 years, he murmured softly. My heart skipped. That bangle had been won at an auction 6 years ago. The girl Julian remembered from his past wasn't me. I smiled, shaking my head. How could that be? 10 years ago, I was still wearing Grandma's jade. It broke in an accident later. Julian's steps faltered. He tried to appear casual, but I could hear the faint tremor in his voice. Grandma's jade? Wasn't your grandmother's gift the antique one? I shook my head firmly. No, the antique one was from an auction. Since the bullet comments had warned me that Julian might later think I had impersonated someone else, I decided to clarify now. I was never his lifesaver. Better to save myself the blame before it came. If I wasn't his lifesaver, would I still be his lover? I watched his pupils contract with surprise, disbelief, anxiety, and then a slow calm. Yet he didn't release my hand. Perhaps I misremembered, he said quietly. The engagement ceremony preparations continued meticulously. People I had sent returned with information. Once I was home, Julian immediately hired a private investigator to look into events from 10 years ago. Finally, the truth the bullet comments had predicted unfolded. 10 years ago, a large-scale cross-state human trafficking case had occurred. Julian and Lyra had both been caught up. While held captive, Julian had been temporarily blinded. Young Lyra had cared for him carefully during that time. After their rescue, Julian and Lyra lost contact. He only remembered that the girl who had helped him wore an antique carved bangle. I and Julian had grown up together as childhood friends. My path crossed with his later, after I bought a bangle at auction and he saw it by chance. That had sparked his intense pursuit of me. Too much time had passed for him to find Lyra quickly, but he could now confirm that my bangle had been purchased at auction 6 years ago. Serena, coming to try on your dress? My bridesmaids called from the doorway. I shook my head. There might not be an engagement party. Yet, until the night before, no engagement cancellation message arrived from the Sterling family. Julian Sterling clearly knew the truth, but he still chose to proceed with me. I clung to a sliver of hope. Julian wasn't the absurd, bangle-obsessed type described by the bullet comments, blindly loving whoever wore it. In a room filled with distinguished guests, We raised our glasses together. I teased lightly. You've always cared so much about that bangle. I thought you were looking for someone through it. This was my last chance for a confession. Instead, Julian kissed my cheek. There's no one else. I love you. Adults could make their own choices. Julian chose me, whether from love or practicality. I, in turn, accepted that choice willingly. After the engagement, leveraging our marital connection, I quickly assumed leadership over all integrated product lines within the Van Industries Sterling Corporation partnership. Compared to outsiders, Julian's family trusted me more. After all, a daughter-in-law became family sooner or later. I also made time to visit Lyra. She hesitated, finally calling me the moment she saw students tossing their graduation caps. Ms. Van, I want to go to college. When she had been most desperate, trapped in that remote mountain village, she had handed me a pack of feminine products. I repaid her with 3 years of student aid. Up to this point, everything seemed to follow the bullet comments prescribed path. Julian and Lyra didn't meet. I confessed the bangle's origin, married into the Sterlings, and gained a capable partner and valuable resources. Then, I discovered Julian Sterling had secretly volunteered as a teacher in a remote area. Before final exams, I visited Lyra, calling ahead. She was older than her classmates, shy and soft-spoken. We have a new volunteer teacher, Mr. Sterling. He's also from Rosewood, like you, Ms. Van. I froze. Rosewood was far from the mountain village. It was unusual for him to volunteer here. Mr. Sterling is a little strange, Lyra said. Did he bother you? I asked, my tone serious. No, he seems nice. But I just feel uncomfortable. I had business in the village soon, so I planned to observe this volunteer teacher. When I arrived, I overheard a few girls gossiping. What's going on with Lyra and the new Mr. Sterling? Is she trying to seduce him, hoping he'll take her to the city? No way, Lyra seems well-behaved. Well-behaved? Then why does Mr. Sterling only answer her questions, even bring her snacks and books? He glares at anyone else who asks for help. I don't even dare ask. Oh my God, a teacher-student romance? No wonder Lyra dropped out before. Could this happen again? I furrowed my brow. The problem was clearly with the teacher, yet the gossip unfairly targeted the student. Any ethical fault on the teacher's side reflected on him, but the speculation still fell on Lyra. I knew I had to warn her to keep her distance. When I found Lyra, she was hunched over her test, deep in concentration. Spotting a missing condition in her solution, I feigned a stern expression and tapped her desk. Careless, little sister. Lyra looked up in surprise. But before she could respond, a hurried voice cut through. Serena Van, what are you doing? I was suddenly pushed aside, my elbows slamming against the back desk. The newcomer stood protectively in front of Lyra, a lesson plan clutched in his hand, his expression tense. It turned out, the new volunteer teacher was Julian Sterling. The classroom was cramped and dilapidated, desks splintered with protruding nails. My arm caught on one, cutting open a deep gash that bled freely. Yet my fiancé seemed oblivious, spreading his arms protectively around Lyra, as if I were some predator. Serena, are you stalking me? What couldn't you resolve in Rosewood that you had to come all this way to harass Lyra? He genuinely thought I had followed him. My chest tightened, cold fear creeping in. I had believed that, after learning the truth, our years of shared history would outweigh any lingering childhood debt for him. I had assumed that was why he honored our engagement. I hadn't realized he was having his cake, and eating it too. Engaged to me, while flying to a mountain village to act as Lyra's protector. And you, Julian Sterling, why are you here? I asked, voice sharp. His expression twisted with conflict. Serena, I've been looking for someone. Before, I thought it was you, but I recently learned the truth. I couldn't wrong you, so I stayed engaged. But I also can't wrong Lyra. I gave you the engagement and the partnership with Sterling Corporation. Can't you understand that I need to repay a life-saving debt? Her family treats her badly. I can't bear it. Suddenly, the image of the good guy, Julian Sterling, the one I had carried in my heart all these years, shattered. In his place stood a man who was selfish, calculating, and hypocritical. Ever since the bullet comments had appeared in my mind, it felt like a sword had hovered over me. At this moment, it fell, severing the last shred of false hope I'd been clinging to. Julian Sterling. I cut him off. Did you only learn the truth after our engagement? He froze, silent, for a long moment. So he had known all along, but had weighed pros and cons and chosen to continue with me anyway. Second question. Did you only realize I might not be your lifesaver when I sent my bangle for repairs? I had thought about it carefully after seeing the bullet comments. It didn't add up. 6 years ago, his eyes had been temporarily blinded during the accident, yes, but our families were longtime acquaintances. Even a child's memory could have told him it wasn't me. And once we were rescued and grew up, he should have regained clarity. Lyra's bangle, though similar to mine, had distinct scuffs and carvings. For 6 years, Julian never sought confirmation, unless he had already intended to pursue me. At that time, van industry stock was booming, multiple product lines expanding. Julian, one of many Sterling descendants, wasn't particularly prominent. To gain influence and secure resources, winning my favor satisfied both his ambition and eased his guilt over the so-called debt of gratitude. Until he graduated, we became engaged, leaving other Sterling heirs far behind. Yet a rare flicker of pure love remained, compelling him to seek out his true beloved. Third question, I pressed. Does Lyra know the truth? Why had this volunteer teacher appeared out of nowhere? Why did Julian care so much for her, giving rise to baseless gossip? I had always thought the plotline of repaying kindness with marriage absurd. If the other person is uninterested, isn't that simply repaying kindness with cruelty? Julian drew a deep breath. I originally planned to keep it from you. I didn't want Lyra to affect our marriage. Once we were married, I would settle her in Hong Kong. I promise she wouldn't bother you. I stared at him, incredulous. Then he turned and gently stroked Lyra's head. I'm sorry it took me so long to find you. 10 years ago, you saved my life. I was that blinded little boy, Jules. Do you remember? 2 pairs of eyes turned to Lyra. Since Julian had first burst into the classroom, Lyra had been pushed behind him, struggling to speak. The young girl finally pushed his hand away, her voice clear and firm. I don't remember. Mr. Sterling, are you mistaken? The bullet comments in my mind scrolled like wildfire. Can someone check the original plot? Was Julian Sterling's lifesaver really not Lyra? Upstairs, I'm checking. Lyra really didn't claim to save anyone. Julian didn't even ask. I assent that his usual self-deluded silent type move. Is the male lead a bangle sexual? He loves whoever wears the bangle. Was he a bangle spirit in a past life? Julian refused to believe her. He insisted I had threatened Lyra, making her afraid to speak the truth. Eventually, Lyra grew exasperated. If you don't believe me, ask my mom and brother. I've never left the village. Fine. Then we'll go to your house. I don't believe your whole family has been bought off by Serena Van. We marched in a large group to the Finch family home, expecting that one word from Mrs. Finch would settle everything. To our surprise, when Julian, in his authoritative manner, asked Mrs. Finch if Lyra had ever been to Rosewood or had been abducted, her expression went frantic. She dropped the cup in her hand. There's no such thing. No, she stammered, pulling Lyra protectively toward her. Did this brat cause trouble at school? I told you girls don't need to read too many books. Once they do, their minds go wild. Did she say something crazy? This girl is a habitual liar. Don't let her trick you. Mrs. Finch's voice was sharp, cruel, her squinting eyes calculating and wary. Jed Finch lounged nearby, basking in the sun, with the same sharp eyes as his mother. But Lyra's eyes were round, innocent. Mrs. Finch was stout and thick-limbed, yet Lyra's figure was delicate, almost like a kitten. A strange suspicion formed in my mind. That bangle. 6 years ago, I had bid on it at an auction, drawn by an inexplicable familiarity. Where had I seen it before? Even before meeting Lyra, even before the auction? I cut off Julian's endless chatter. Mrs. Finch, do you have any photos of Lyra as a child? Why would I have such a thing? She muttered. I began searching the house as I spoke. Mrs. Finch clearly favored her son, and while the family wasn't wealthy, the house was full of photos of him and family portraits. Not this one, not this one. Then I found it. Mrs. Finch realized something was wrong and lunged to snatch the photo from me. But I caught a fleeting glimpse, just a second, of the little girl pushed aside in the picture. It was enough. I recognized Lyra's young face instantly. Familiar, like someone from my past. I was determined to take Lyra with me. Mrs. Finch wailed, pointing a finger at me and cursing. She's stealing people in broad daylight. Her eyes darted frantically. If you want to take this girl, fine. Leave the bride price. That Mr. Thompson of yours said girls who study should get $500,000. Ironically, Julian Sterling, the same man who had just fiercely protected his wife in front of me and had promised to protect Lyra thoroughly. He suddenly tried to persuade me, as if pleading his case. Lyra is still a Finch family member. You can't just take her away. He knew perfectly well how Mrs. Finch and Jed treated Lyra, how they beat and scolded her, treating their daughter like a source of income. Yet he was unwilling to pull her out of that misery. I called him out bluntly. You're afraid that if Lyra leaves with me, you won't be able to get her back. But if she stays with the Finches, you can still buy her later, right?
I said.
Mrs. Finch's eyes flicked around. Hey, highest bidder wins, Ms. Van. If you want this girl too, then offer $800,000. Everything felt like a grotesque comedy. No one asked Lyra what she wanted. They priced and bargained over her like meat on a chopping block. I looked at Lyra, trembling behind her mother. The Finch family's daily torment had bent her into someone timid and fearful. But the girl I remembered had been bright and wild, like sunlight. I gave a cold laugh. Lyra is an adult. She has the right to decide where she goes. And you didn't think I came alone, did you? I added. A line of tall, imposing bodyguards filed in behind me, each large enough to pick up Julian and spin him around, effectively hemming in Mrs. Finch and Jed. The backlight made them look even more daunting. I extended my hand and asked gently, Lyra, do you want to come with me? My mind flashed back. 10 years ago, I nearly became another victim in that cross-state human trafficking ring. Our school bus had broken down for repairs in the suburbs, right where the criminals struck. Julian had been abducted. As I braced for capture, a hand shoved me into a wheat field. It was Rowan Van, my childhood confidant and cousin. She ripped together whatever she could, piling debris to hide me, and told me to stay silent. But she was taken instead. I remembered everything. That bangle, the one that felt so familiar, I had seen it long ago at Rowan's house. As a child, my injured right foot made me walk with a slight limp, which the other kids delighted in mocking. They had not yet learned hypocrisy. They said things bluntly. They called me a cripple, a monster. Only Rowan, 2 years older, stood up for me. She planted her hands on her hips and chased the bullies away with a broom, shouting, Anyone who dares to badmouth Serena again, I'll spank them. The boys scattered. Rowan pulled me into the sun and grinned. When you get older, and you can beat them till they scream, no one will dare bully you. It was a hard life. My parents sent my brother to boxing. They taught me to be a gentle lady. Your foot is injured, not your fist. Rowan just laughed and wiped my face. There are many ways to win. Strong fist, strong skill, same for girls. Rowan once told me about a sister, around my age. My sister also has trouble walking. She was born that way. No one will bully her. I had never seen another girl with Rowan, she said. She was stolen. I will find my sister someday. That memory hit me now, sharp and clear. The bangle, Rowan's sister, Lyra, everything snapped into place. I think I finally understood who Julian Sterling's true lifesaver had been. On the plane, Julian was unusually agitated. Serena Van, what exactly are you doing? Why did you take Lyra? We just got engaged, and I haven't wronged you in any way. Why are you being so relentless? But I had no patience to argue. Above the clouds, I held Lyra's hand, feeling an inexplicable sting in my eyes. At the Finch home, I had patiently held out my hand, and finally, Lyra had summoned the courage to take it. Mrs. Finch was still screaming that she would call the police. I sneered. Do you really dare to call the police? Annoyed, I muttered. Julian Sterling, can you please shut up? He was so loud, so selfish, it irritated me just to look at him. I asked Lyra about the bangle on her wrist. She hesitated. I don't remember. I never met my grandmother. She had already passed by the time I had memories. My mom tried to take it off, but it was stuck tight. She couldn't remove it. The wooden bangle didn't look valuable, so Mrs. Finch had given up. Have your mom and brother always treated you badly? I asked. Lyra paused, shook her head, then nodded. No one had ever been kind to her. Just a little care had been enough to make her trust someone, to follow along. Suddenly, I understood the warning of the bullet comments. In the original plot, Julian had kept her in another city, providing only limited conditions, restricting her freedom, and yet Lyra had still obeyed him. If love is abundant, why would someone willingly humble themselves? Perhaps she had always been destined to receive so much care. Lyra, I want to introduce you to a few people. Don't be afraid, I said. When the plane landed, The Van family was already at the arrival gate. As soon as Grandma Van saw Lyra, she burst into tears, holding her hands and repeating, "So alike, so very alike." Rowan's parents had passed away young, so I had never met them. But Grandma Van, seeing Lyra's photo for the first time, had been shocked. She insisted on personally traveling across the country to bring Lyra home. It took some effort to calm her. "She looks just like Rowan's mother," Grandma Van said, almost trembling with emotion. Julian followed behind, utterly stunned. "What's going on?" The Sterling family was a long-established real estate dynasty. Grandma Sterling was usually decisive and composed, but even she looked bewildered. "Isn't it obvious?" I said quietly. Lyra wasn't truly a Finch child. The Finches had purchased her cheaply during chaotic times, treating her poorly, scolding and beating her constantly. Jed Finch didn't care that she was malnourished and frail. But Lyra was delicate, pretty, and bright, so they hatched a plan to marry her off for money. The young girl looked bewildered amidst the crowd. One by one, Grandma Van, her aunts, uncles, and other Van relatives came forward, eager to reclaim the years they had missed. "Lyra, I'm your aunt. I was closest to your dad." "Lyra, I'm your mother's twin sister. Look at you, you're just like her." "Lyra, I stepped in, slipping my hand into Lyra's nervous one. "Grandma, aunts, uncles, shouldn't we go home first?" Grandma Van laughed through her tears. Yes, let's go home. Serena, you must come too." Julian Sterling tried to quietly follow, but Grandma Van turned and gave him a sharp glare that made him freeze in place. Back in the mountain village, I had already told her how Julian tried to stop me from taking Lyra away. So now, the entire Van family looked at him with thinly veiled disgust. "The Sterling family used to have class," one of the uncles muttered. "How did they end up with such an heir?" The Van family held considerable influence, and the comment landed like a slap. Julian's face drained of color. He looked at me desperately, hoping I'd defend him as his fiancé. Instead, I calmly pulled his hand off my arm. "Did you forget?" I said coolly. "This is where you hurt me." Right then, I made it official. Van Industries has decided to call off the engagement with Julian Sterling. The Van family celebrated the return of their long-lost eldest granddaughter. Further investigations soon revealed that Mrs. Finch hadn't only bought a child, but had also been involved in an entire trafficking network. Lyra herself gave the police information about Mrs. Finch's so-called friends, helping them arrest the entire ring. When the Van family discovered that Julian Sterling had once disguised himself as a volunteer teacher just to harass their beloved granddaughter, they severed all business ties with the Sterling family for good. Julian's social standing collapsed overnight. In desperation, he came to find me. "Serena," he pleaded, crouching beside me, his voice shaking, "we shared so many good years. I was confused. I mistook the wrong person. Please forgive me this once. You've always been my wife in my heart." I threw the contents of my wine glass straight into his face. He froze, crimson dripping down his collar. "But you don't fit the image of a husband in my heart," I said coldly. If not for everything that happened, I might never have seen how selfish and hollow he truly was beneath that polished surface. His regret wasn't for losing me, it was for losing his access to the Van family's power. "Did you really think no one would find out you tried to propose to them after I left?" I added with a faint smile. "The whole circle's talking about it now." Julian's eyes widened. He had gone in secret. So how did the news spread? Of course, I had made sure it did. Otherwise, how could I have publicly ended the engagement, secured generous compensation from the Sterling family, and gained sympathy as a composed, independent woman? He stammered, "Serena, please, this was all a misunderstanding." Lyra, now recognized as the Van family's granddaughter, had never lied. She'd been kidnapped at 4 years old and kept in that remote mountain village ever since. Which meant Julian Sterling's so-called lifesaver wasn't her. "Still curious?" I asked quietly. "If it wasn't me and it wasn't Lyra, then who do you think it was?" I took them both to a quiet cemetery. "Rowan, I found our sister," I said softly. Lyra's childhood photos were nearly identical to Rowan's. "If you were still here," I whispered, setting down a bouquet, "you'd probably look just like her now." Lyra whispered, "Sister?" Yes, Rowan would have been different, brighter, bolder, full of laughter. I brushed the dust from her gravestone. "And the girl who once saved you," I added, glancing at Julian. "That was her." Julian stood frozen, confusion and dawning guilt twisting his face. If he'd had even a fraction of empathy, he might have realized the truth long ago. Both Rowan and Lyra had identical family heirlooms, simple wooden bangles. One was buried beneath the stone before us. Julian's voice trembled. Back then, did she for me? I raised a hand to stop him. Don't flatter yourself. Rowan didn't die for you. 10 years ago, that rescue and capture operation succeeded because Rowan was brilliant. She had carefully left behind clues, each one leading the police closer to the traffickers' hideout. She once told me she had rehearsed it countless times in her mind, how she would stop the traffickers, how she would rescue her sister. And she really did it. She might not have saved her own sister, but she saved more than 30 other children, mending over 30 broken families. Rowan was an angel on earth, but maybe God decided to call his angel home. 3 years after that successful rescue, Rowan fell ill. Despite every effort, she didn't make it. Her only regret before passing was not finding her sister. Now, standing before her grave, I whispered, "You can finally rest easy, Rowan." My throat tightened. "I miss you so much." Julian Sterling knelt before her grave, murmuring something about atonement. When Lyra and I reached the foot of the mountain, the groundskeeper called. "Ms. Van, that young man left in a hurry," he said. "He didn't even stay 5 minutes. He's so fake." "Yes," I replied with a faint nod. "He is." Julian Sterling's entire life had been one long performance, and he couldn't even keep the act up for 10 minutes. He must have received a call from the Sterling family, no doubt. A devastating one. Shortly after, Mr. Sterling, his grandfather, personally visited both families to apologize. In front of everyone, he announced that Julian was being stripped of all management rights and company positions, and that he would be sent abroad for reflection. During Mr. Sterling's lifetime, Julian would never again be allowed to return or interfere with company affairs. Just like that, everything Julian had schemed and clawed for over the years was gone. He had been one step away from becoming the heir. Now, that step had turned into an abyss. They said he was so furious he suffered a heart attack. No one bothered to visit. As for me, I accepted the Sterling family's compensation with perfect grace, signing a new partnership contract with a freshly appointed young head of Sterling Corp. And while their company was undergoing restructuring, I quietly acquired several valuable assets in the background. Those who had been waiting for me to crumble, to see me abandoned, humiliated, were sorely disappointed. Instead of a tear-streaked face, they saw me standing taller than ever, deepening my collaboration with Van Industries. With the combined strength of our two corporations, I secured complete control over Van Industries' most promising future division. Lyra, now surrounded by genuine love, began to bloom, confident, lively, radiant. One day, I told her the same words Rowan once said to me. "Girls with strong will and strong ability, there's nothing in this world you can't conquer."